All right, everyone, welcome back to the Sagey Bard podcast. My name is Bard, and
And
to my
I
right,
am safe.
all right, all right, guys. We on this podcast we are now discussing business and everything surrounding business. So there may be a few social things here and there. Today we're going to be talking about Airbnb and how it's what and specifically the specific market that we'll be discussing is New York City, and then sort of in general how Airbnb has been affecting the prices in some major cities of long-term rentals. Airbnb is typified as being a short-term rental. I believe short-term is classified as anything under 30 days. Is that correct,
That's
Seiji?
correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Now, Seiji, you are a landlord. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, awesome. So you have a bird's eye view of the situation, and you're on the ground as well. So this is gonna, I think, people will really benefit from this discussion. All right, really quickly. So being let's talk quickly about long term versus short term. What do you what why do you okay? Have you ever done short term rentals with your properties or any of your
Absolutely.
okay
I am currently using some of them for short-term rentals.
for short term? Okay. What is all right, so obviously Airbnb is thriving, right? In some respects, right? And it's had a really good
Well,
run up
it's not
until
really
recently.
thriving anymore.
Okay, so it's had a really good run up for years until I would say until recently, where now it's starting to face a little bit of resistance because I believe of the economic model of not everything is unlimited. I forgot the exact term. There's no unlimited anything unless God's involved. That's the only way you can make something unlimited. And then how do you really ascribe value to that? But as a economics professor, forgot his name, was saying, there, the unlimited growth of a company, unlimited XYZ, whatever it may be, is a fallacy. There's no such thing. So in this case, we're talking about rentals. So why are landlords, just for our audience, why are landlords some landlords pivoting to short term? What are some of the benefits that you may see? Then we're going to talk about, is Airbnb going down, and our positions on that.
Well, I definitely think that Airbnb is going down right now, and there are a number of reasons. Number one, it's going down because you have government regulations that didn't exist 10 years ago that are coming into play now as politicians and communities are rising up against companies that are involved with short-term rentals like Airbnb, Verbo, and any other type of short-term rental. And the reason they're doing that is because they're saying that the reason that we have a massive cost of living increase is because people are taking off long-term rentals and then redoing them and turning them into short-term rentals because there's more it's more lucrative supposedly for landlords to be involved in short-term rentals rather than long-term rentals. So then this then takes a supply of
Mm-hmm.
long-term units off. It then creates more housing pressure, and people are competing for they're competing with short-term rentals, and they can't afford housing.
Okay.
And
Mhm.
basically, it's more expensive because there is increased short-term rentals, and also now you have a very strong hotel lobby that doesn't like competition, and they're now going after Airbnb as well with politicians who they're saying, well, look, the reason this is so expensive is because you have Airbnb destroying your cities.
Right. The thing is we're going to talk about in our second section, guys. We got about 11 more minutes on this section. We're going to get into some of these articles. There's one from I think it's Newsweek that's let's go ahead and add this to the. So we're gonna look at this article from Newsweek. The language of Airbnb being destructive. I think that there was a trend. We're going to get into disruptive businesses in the second section, but I believe it started with disruptive. I would say that would be the adjective, and then destructive, as Seiji said, which I believe is correct. I believe that's where we are at the moment. I think it is correcting. All right, so here's an article, Newsweek: Airbnb rentals are plummeting in its biggest U.S. market. I wonder why. The drop in Airbnb listings in New York City, which immediately followed the city authorities' strict new laws on short-term rentals in early September, has continued in October, as shown by a recent report shared with Newsweek. According to the latest data from analytics site AirDNA, the number of Airbnb listings in New York City was down 4% last month compared to October 2022. Though many listings have changed from short-term to midterm rentals, setting their minimum stay as 28 nights or more, the company told Newsweek. The drop is even more dramatic when focusing on short-term listings, where the minimum stay is less than 28 days. The available listings in New York City were down 34% from a year ago. How do you view that? Do you view that as simply being a correction of a wrong that was introduced into the market? Or do you see that as an injustice to homeowners who want to list their properties on Airbnb? What do you think?
I view it as an injustice because I believe in total freedom for the landlord to do what they want with their own properties.
Okay.
I see and can understand how
Mhm.
this affects supply and demand,
Yeah.
but I am absolutely on the side of people being able to do with their property what they
Mhm.
want to do with their property, and that's that's the owner of the property.
Gotcha. Now, okay, let's look at it this way. I'm gonna look at it from another angle that maybe a lot of people haven't looked at. A city, there are city planners, there are people in the city, the mayor of a city.
Uh-huh.
His job, one of his jobs or her jobs, is to grow that city economically by
Yep.
inviting investment, inviting different things to come into the city to make that city attractive, so that more businesses would come, families would move there, etc. Um, if I'm a mayor and I see that families, which represent to me a tax base, are attempting to move to my city but can't find anywhere to live, I'm going to be concerned, because now the city's losing out on potential tax dollars, which means
Mhm.
restaurants, gyms, etc., shopping are all losing potential revenue because um, we can't grow this city. This is me as a city's main manager, the mayor. I'm overseeing every department. I'm looking at this and I'm saying, whoa, we can't grow the city. What's the problem? And then the complaints start to come in. Well, people can't find anywhere affordable to live. And then we start digging and we find out, oh, okay, these prices are being this business is hurting us, hurting the city as a whole. It's hurting our growth potential as a whole, and it's increasing rents, it's increasing property values as well, as this article is going to get into. I'm going to show you that. What do you make of that? What do you think about that concept of a city manager and the mayor
I
looking
think that
for?
definitely part of their job, but I think that can be done in different ways. That can be done through working with the state governor to the whatever county has jurisdiction to make it more possible for those landlords that are using Airbnb or the people who own property to build multi-unit housing, where
Mhm.
the city will work with them to lessen regulations and with different environmental organizations so that it's more feasible, because the landlord can't be stuck in a situation where you have a whole bunch of regulations. They're being blamed for the housing situation when you have a situation when you have a situation that's created by politicians that allow for people to terrorize them, destroy their properties, and there's no protections for landlords. So
Okay.
if you have your money tied up in an investment, but then a tenant has all kinds of protections to stay in that property for
Hmm.
whatever reason it is for months at a time, it's a problem. And that's why landlords oftentimes will go towards short term rentals. It's not just because they're looking to get rid of long term rental people, it's because you're getting paid with a credit card. There are protections, there's other insurance in there, and you
I
don't
see.
have to keep people indefinitely in your property because different laws apply to short term renters as opposed to long term renters, especially in states like New York, California, Oregon, and Washington. Once you have a tenant in there, even if they choose not to pay you, it is very difficult and
Hmm.
expensive to get them out. And
Okay.
unfortunately, this penalizes a lot of other people because I'll tell you, from my perspective, I don't really want to be in the short term rental market. However, I
Okay.
am because I don't like dealing with deadbeat renters. That's
Gotcha.
what
And
it
that
is.
makes sense. That completely makes sense. Let me read a little bit more of this article. Down at the bottom, it says under the new rules, which Airbnb called a de facto ban, hosts need to register with the city to be allowed to rent out their homes on a short-term basis. Yeah, anytime you got to register with the city, that's because regular landlords don't have to register with the city. So what the city's trying to do is
No,
control.
they typically do.
Oh,
Even
you
regular,
typically do. Oh, okay.
depending on the jurisdiction, whether it's a lot of places will say if the property you have to pay a special fee if it's a renter, if it's being used for renters.
Gotcha.
I mean, not
So
all of them, but a lot of them do.
so the city's trying to control. Now let's look at some other type of controls. Now I believe free market will control ultimately. That also is a control because if I think of if enough people go short term, and then what will happen is they can't. Let's say they can't find short term renters, right? Let's say it's not lucrative, but there's a market for long term. I think a lot of these Airbnb people who are looking who wanted to initially do short term, I think they would go with the long term play because that would represent market saturation, and they would say, "Oh, okay, well, this is better. This is a better option. At least I have someone in here
Let
uh,
me tell you,
every month."
a lot of people think that getting in and doing a short-term rental is easy. It's not easy. It's actually pretty miserable, hard work. You
Mm,
have to make sure that your property is constantly upgraded. It
hmm.
actually causes homeowners to improve their properties much faster than you would if you had a long-term renter in. So even when these properties go back on the market, because of how many dollars were invested in improving the property, it has
Hmm.
to be rented at a higher amount. A short-term
Gotcha.
renter has a higher expectation for a nicer property than a long-term renter.
Gotcha. All right, let's we have a couple minutes left here. Let's say this is from Market Realist. Airbnbs are making it harder for people to find long-term rentals, which we kind of discussed. The housing market is suffering under inflation, and the pandemic created several shortages that are keeping the housing supply low. Airbnbs are adding to the crisis too. People looking to buy have been met with higher prices and interest rates, but renters have been facing problems of their own as well. Dude, did you hear about how landlords were ending leases just to push people out so that they could rent them out on a short-term basis? Did you? I'm sure you heard about that, right?
Well, the thing is, I don't. Again, I feel bad for some of those people, but that's the way the market is. And what will
Mhm.
eventually happen? The definition of the markets is they are efficient. The people who are providing a service that's needed, they will continue to run and be profitable. Otherwise, there's going to be a deluge of properties that end up on the market, which people, investors bought a second, third, fourth homes that
Mhm.
are not going to be profitable, especially with the higher interest rates right now. They will start to default.
Ah. Okay, okay. According to MarketWatch, based on data from 2012 to 2016, the vacation rental fad is hurting the housing market. It was found that Airbnb short-term rentals contributed to a $9 increase in rent and a $1,800 increase in home prices. That doesn't seem like horrible. That doesn't seem like a very painful shift. $9? That doesn't
That
seem
might,
like something that wouldn't stop me from renting. $9 added to my rent. I don't see how that $1,800 increase in home prices on average. I don't see that as particularly painful, but I see in some of the bigger cities where there's more demand and there's less housing, like for instance, New York, Los Angeles. I think in places like that, I think the prices are definitely more noticeable. Like in New York, I want to say rents have gone up like 2 grand. Have you heard about that?
yeah, but the thing is, you have to look at it, and that's so depending on when that article is written, it's inaccurate. It has gone up, and probably has gone up by 2 grand or even more in some places in New York. But what is the comparison against? If the comparison is against um, June of 2020, when Fauci and Cuomo had everything on lockdown, then
Hmm.
obviously that's a bad comparison. If you take that from 2018 all the way through to 2023 and you factor in inflation, it's probably not that significant. And so
Mm.
the thing is, when we're looking at data, we all have the same data, but how do we interpret that data and over what time frame?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it is grossly inaccurate for someone to say, okay, well, look, this is where prices were in 2020, and look at how much they are in 2023. When you finally had owners who now have the ability to increase their margins again, because whenever you have a tenant who's in for a year or less, there are different laws that apply to them. If they've been there for
Mm.
2 years or longer, then you have to give them certain notification and all of that. And depending on how aggressive you were even during the pandemic, you
Hmm.
have to be able to, you can only increase your the rent in a lot of states like California by a certain amount
Yeah.
every year.
Yeah,
And
because it was we found that it was creating homelessness.
what happens is um, if you didn't increase your rent during COVID, you are locked into a certain percentage. So in California, if an LLC owns a rental property, you can only
Hmm.
increase it by 5% plus the cost of living increase. So then that might end up being 7 to 8%, depending on what the Fed has manipulated the rate to look like.
Now, not to really dig too deep into this, maybe we can do another segment on this, but I think the actions you mentioned, the Fed, I think
Uh-huh.
inflation and things that just the general overall destruction, degradation of the economy has made it difficult. It makes it so that legislators have to do more to try to protect because people are operating on thin margins as it is when it comes to Americans are operating on very, very thin margins. They can
So are the
barely afford
landlords.
them.
So
And
are the
so are the
landlords.
landlords. So are the landlords. But
And you basically put them in a situation where they have to continue housing people who are not paying,
mhm,
then you're putting them in a worse situation. With the COVID bailout money, that didn't go to landlords. That went to people who then could choose to do what they wanted. And a lot of times they did not pay their rent.
I definitely hear you. I'm just talking outside of COVID. I'm saying that just the general economy outside of the COVID economy. Now that we're outside of COVID, the acute, um, uh, COVID, we have a situation where the inflation is the pains of inflation are settling in. People are starting to really feel the pain of inflation. Food prices are up, everything's up. The dollar's worth less. So it's very important that city leaders put well, I think the market would correct it anyway, but I think in order to prevent the escalation of homelessness, which is already starting, I think it's important to have some sort of controls to not disrupt things rapidly. I think a certain increase per year, it should be allowed to allow things to gradually take place. But
Well, here's the thing.
you don't want to create a crisis, is
If
what
you
you
didn't,
want to.
if you were merciful and you didn't increase your rates during COVID,
Mhm.
you are now stuck in a situation where you can't increase them very much because of the percentage increase laws. So you're stuck.
Right,
Okay.
I get it. And yeah.
And then as you continue on, like for example, we're talking about tax bases. When you have a whole bunch of people visiting a city, they're
Mhm.
also providing taxes.
Right.
When you're looking at, um, I think that these laws that are getting put in place, they disproportionately affect landlords. When you're paying
Mhm.
people oftentimes to stay at home, then
Mhm.
it penalizes landlords because they're not working. It actually penalizes the person who's staying at home because they don't have the work ethic that's necessary for the survival of the fittest mentality. You don't work to
Mhm.
live. And what did you say in another one of our podcasts? You said that basically he who does not work should not
Yeah.
expect to eat.
Shall not eat. Yeah, that's actually from the Bible. If a man doesn't work, he shall not eat, which indicates it's, biblical economics. You have to work to eat. There's no
It is.
handouts. Even with God, there's no handouts unless you're
The
talking
thing is,
about
that you
manna
look
falling
at it,
from the sky.
and if you're going to give a huge amount of resources to people who are not from the United States,
Right.
then the expectation is you should be able to do the same thing for your own citizens. So we have got a bigger problem than that. And what I don't appreciate is when these politicians who are not able to step far enough back
Mhm.
try pointing at one group and saying, okay, well, these are the people that we need to punish. Okay, what
Mhm.
about if you just start with the basics? I've been
Mhm.
involved with rental properties for my entire life. My
Mhm.
entire life. And I have done all of it, from cleaning feces off the wall from people who don't want to move and
Mhm.
then they destroy your property, to having to get rid of properties where you're forced to sell them just to get rid of people.
Interesting.
I
All right,
I am
go
on
ahead.
I'm kind of on the other side of this, and I think that
Mhm.
one of the easiest ways to improve the amount of long-term rentals is by making it easier for landlords to evict
Mhm.
people who are not paying. If it
Right.
was easy
And the what
uh-huh.
you're talking about, the COVID situation, which is, definitely understandable. You're talking about the new rules that came into place. I get that.
No, I'm even talking about during COVID because you know what? I get that you can't pay, but you have to figure out your own situation. Your problem should not become someone else's problem. And I believe that to a T.
Right. And all right. Okay. We could probably discuss that a little bit later. Yeah. I think government. Let's do this. We'll talk about that in another episode. For the next
Sure.
5 or 6 minutes. Let's see if we can transition really quickly into. Actually, let's do this. Let's go ahead and end this stream, and then we'll start another one
Sure.
where we actually talk about disruptive markets. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and end this one. We thank you for watching. Definitely like, share, and subscribe. And as always, guys, we'll see you in the next one.